I'm Sky-Jane, and last year I read 50 books. Over the past few years, I've increased my reading massively. So the first year I started, I set out a goal of 35. I missed it and hit 33. The second year, 50. The third year, this year, 35. I thought I'd share my tips on starting from my reading journey, which I started in probably year 11, around that time, when I really started to get back into reading. Because when I was younger, I quite enjoyed reading. I used to go to the book fairs, get the book tokens every year. I read all the Tom Gates, Diary of the Wimpy Kids, How to Train Your Dragon. There was a Star Wars book, the Percy Jackson Apollo series. When I was younger, I found reading such a joy, and I remember going to secondary school and thinking that reading was somewhat uncool, and I stopped doing it. When I was about in year 11, so I was 15 or 16, I started getting back into reading. And just as a fact, this is the book I'm currently reading, which is Why Politics Fails by Ben Ansell, who was my lecturer last term, and I found his lecture quite appealing, so I thought I'd give his book a go. And it's about the traps of modern politics. I am just a normal, ordinary girl who quite likes reading. So without further ado, here are the tips for how to read more in 2025. Number 1, be realistic. I know for people who haven't read before, or if you're starting at 0, 50 can sound like quite a lot of books. But I didn't get there overnight, and it's pretty achievable for most people if you want to do it, of course. Or if you just want to get into reading as well, that's probably even better. Maybe you clicked on this video wanting to read 50 books, but do you really want to? How much does that mean you actually have to read per day, every day, for the whole year, the whole 365 days? There are around 52 weeks in a year, which means that you need to be reading about a book a week. And to read a book a week, how many pages per day do you need to read? Well, the average novel, let's say you're reading fiction, is between 250 and 350 pages. But let's be on the safe side and say that it's between the middle of those two. So around 300 pages per week, or roundabout. Okay, so that leaves you with around 40 pages per day. Well, it would take a little over an hour for the average reader to read 40 pages. So if you're unwilling to commit at least an hour to reading per day, then you might want to revise this goal and set something more realistic. So maybe go through and think about a number that doesn't sound too far. You can always increase or surpass that at a later date. Okay, so if reading over an hour a day sounds like too much for you, then, just set a smaller goal. Maybe 20 or 25 books to start with might be a reasonable goal. Once you set a goal, the next challenge is sticking to it, and that's where streaks come in. Number 2, the power of streaks. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it would be that it's about consistent reading. So in my opinion, it'd be better to read, say, 5 pages a day than read 50 pages in one day, none the next day, none the next day, none the next day, and then 100 pages the day after that. Really, if you want to make reading consistent in your life and you want to be a reader, to have it as part of your daily routine, your daily life. And if that sounds like too much or too big, it's really not. Let me explain. So someone who conveys the importance of this really well is James Clear in his book Atomic Habits. I mean, you've probably heard of it. It's a best-selling book. If you haven't read it yet, definitely add that to your reading list for this year. Clear talks about setting small, very, very small achievable goals that you can enact on a daily basis to get huge results. And I think this is definitely something that you can see with reading. So for me, personally, when I started out reading, I set myself the goal of reading 10 pages per day. And in the beginning, that was quite a hard goal for me because I hadn't read consistently for a long time. But once you get into the routine of reading 10, it becomes quite easy and you can easily step it up. I think that's why you should set the bar really, really low for when you're reading. It's better to say I'm going to read 1 page per day and turn up for the 7 days, rather than read 100 pages one day and read 5 the next. That's why I really think if you're trying to get into reading, the best thing you can do is probably set yourself between 5 to 10 pages, or you can even just do a page a day. It's just the act of showing up that will get you into reading, and you can always surpass the goal. If you feel like reading 5 pages one day and you're really finding it hard, then you can just turn up. But if you're really enjoying the book and getting into the groove of it, then you can always go over 5 pages and, then you'll see where the magic of the book takes you. We can see the idea of automaticity in James Clear's book, where he shows the diagram of over time, things becoming easier and easier as you repeat them. And that's why reading a few pages a day is a really powerful tool to get into reading or any habit in general. So I'd really recommend that if there's one takeaway from today, it's consistency. And Set a goal for yourself this year, it's the beginning of a new year, to read 1 page per day. Number 3, make reading pleasurable. I think this is a really important point because 1, reading is naturally pleasurable, but I do think there's a bit of activation energy that's required to get into a book. That's not the same for, say, a YouTube video that you turn on, or a social media clip, or an Instagram reel, or a TikTok. It's just not the same. And you essentially need to start, and the enjoyment level increases over time. So you might start in the negative, and then as you continue through the book, it becomes more and more interesting and you become more and more engrossed. By that, I mean almost this trend of romanticizing your life. Okay, so I'm going to be honest. Over the last few months, starting at university in Michaelmas term and having 1 to 2 essays due per week has been difficult. And I've really struggled with reading. So this year, I've only read 35 books, but I'm fine with that. The thing that has irritated me is the inconsistency of my reading and finding that I don't actually have enough time or feel I have enough time to read as much as I want to be doing so. So this year, I've decided that on Sundays, I'm going to visit a coffee shop and read for an hour by myself. And it's going to be a slow morning for me, because that's what I want to do. I think this is a really important point. Reading is a very personal experience, and you can find ways of making it part of your life that make it enjoyable and something you do long term. And that's why I think I've been successful in cultivating this habit of reading and doing it consistently for over 3 years now. So another example might be going to Waterstones, browsing the shelves, looking at what's come out, what new authors have come out. Maybe you find a new author that you really like and you pre-order their book and you get excited about it. Another thing you can do is walk in nature and read a book, say on a bench, or watch a really nice view while reading. I've definitely done this a few times. For example, a few years ago, I was reading a book called Small Pleasures by Claire Chamber. And I remember walking to a park on a sunny day, which is obviously not right now in England, but walking to a park on a sunny day and sitting down and reading this book. And the experience of that was, this sounds very odd, but it was almost emotional, and it's something that has stuck with me since. And the joy that I sat there for a few hours with a sausage roll and read my book, although it sounds strange, is something that makes reading really enjoyable. Cultivating core memories of reading and becoming acquainted with reading as not just an act but a part of your life is something that's going to make you successful in your reading endeavors. So if you want to read more, make it enjoyable. Go to a coffee shop, treat yourself to a latte, whether that's with oat or almond or just ordinary milk. Treat yourself to a drink and sit down and get your book out and just sit there. Have some time to yourself and just read. Also, to make reading more enjoyable, you can definitely invest into reading. Since going to university, I have to move my things out every 8 weeks. This means I don't really want to be carrying lots of books around with me, so I invested in a Kindle. It might actually be more convenient and make it easier for you to read. And though you don't need an expensive Kindle to get started with reading or to have a reading habit, although when I did get there, I was unable to connect my Kindle to Wi-Fi and ended up being unable to read the books on there. Anyways, this term I'm definitely bringing more physical books because I do think there is something to the physicality of a book that is just simply unbeaten, and the feeling of it in your sorry, I'm such a book nerd, guys. Step number 4, read what you like but explore. If you're just getting started with reading, read things that seem particularly appealing to you or things that you've really wanted to read. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you already have some books that you want to read, but also don't forget to branch out and try new books. I mean, I can't really make this point considering that about 80% of my reading is non-fiction, and some people think that is totally weird and don't understand why anyone would do that for fun. But for me personally, I really enjoy it. So it's all about not listening to what book is good or bad, it's what book you like. So if you like Colleen Hoover or if you like Sally Rooney, read that. Don't force yourself to read things that you don't like. Personally, I love reading non-fiction, history, politics. As you can see on my shelf back there, those are the kinds of books that really interest me. But you can read whatever you like, whether it's contemporary, classics, or even branch out. So for example, a few years ago, I had a bit of a kind of side project, which was to read more classics than I usually would. And I found some really good books that I ended up enjoying unexpectedly. One example of that was Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, which definitely had quite a big impact on me. And then I consequently went to see the show in the National Theatre and ended up very much almost in tears with my twin sister about the end scene of Rosa Sharon. If you guys read the book, you'll know what I mean. I won't elaborate. And don't hesitate to ask your friends for recommendations. I'm sure they'll have plenty in store, and particularly since reading has become more and more popular with the rise of book talk, booktube, with YouTubers such as Jack Ben Edwards, who I personally really like myself. Also, one thing I experimented with last year was buddy reads. So with my good friend Callum, we both read a few books together, and I really enjoyed To Kill a Mockingbird, which is not something that I would naturally read probably by myself. It ended up being a really lovely read and a great break from the university work that I was doing at the time. So reading with other people, sharing your love for reading or what you're enjoying, characters, ideas, is something that I would recommend. You don't even need to join a book club. You can just use an app called Storygraph, which I personally use. I know people use Goodreads as well. This is definitely not sponsored, as this is my first video. Or you can just discuss books that you're reading. So for Christmas, both my sister and I got Sally Rooney's new book, Intermezzo, which I'd been waiting until the VAC to read, and it definitely did not disappoint. I love Sally Rooney's new prose style and the kind of thoughts that you get of the characters, and almost a nonsensical commentary of what's going on around them and the world that they're inhabiting. And I was able to discuss the characters' texture and the relationship between the main characters, Ivan and Peter, the two brothers in the book. So I think definitely speaking about what you've read with other people, even if they haven't read it, and telling them about what you thought was interesting and talk about those books, I think that brings something quite magical to the world. And so I guess that's why I'm making this video. To conclude, read what you like, expand, and share your ideas with your friends. Reading is such an expansive field. There are literally books. There are millions of books at this point that you're never going to be able to read them all. So there's going to be a book out there for you, no matter how niche it is. Point number 5, finding dead times. I think there's a lot of dead time in people's days. Let's be honest, guys. Let's check your screen time right now. How much time does it say on there? How much time? Because I know when I was younger, I used to spend a lot of time on my phone or watching talks, and then I eventually deleted the app, which again, I would probably recommend to a lot of people. But if you don't want to do that, of course you don't have to, but it definitely does help. And you find that you actually have quite a few pockets of time in your day. So for example, when I was at sixth form, my journey to school involved a 20-minute train ride, which was often, knowing Southeastern, delayed. So one thing that I would do is read on the train, and that was a really easy way to read. And it's also a really relaxing way to get into school and kind of turn up ready for school. And on the way home, when sometimes I was exhausted, just getting into a good book could be something that could take you away from the exam stress of A-levels and just make your day that much better. So I think if you have dead time, say a commute, or if maybe check your screen time, how much time are you spending on your phone? Do you want to be spending that much time? Could you allocate 10 minutes of that per day to reading? Reduce your screen time by 10 minutes to read for 10 minutes more, and that could be enough to start your reading journey. Or if you're traveling somewhere to see somebody, to wait in a waiting room, say you're waiting at the dentist or you're waiting at a very long NHS queue. I mean, a book could always be something that you get out instead of scrolling, and kind of, instead of using your phone, alternate it for that. Another thing you could do if you're struggling with your screen time is get an app called Opal. Again, this is not sponsored, but they have a student discount, which is 50%. So I'll leave that in the description if anyone's interested and they genuinely have a phone addiction. I wish you luck, my friend. Beyond the numbers, I know I've stressed this quite a few times in the video, but it's really, 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 really important that you're not, if you set a reading goal, don't just set something that's really high and unrealistic, not only because you might not achieve it, but also because reading is not about being productive. It's about reading and enjoying the process. And I actually found the year that I read 50 books, I've often found it unenjoyable because I knew that I had to get through these books, and it felt like a checklist process of ticking off books. And that's why this year I actually set a lower goal of 35. I know, for example, on the last day of the year, I was trying to rush through Great Gatsby, and then I didn't really end up enjoying the book. And I slightly wonder if that is because I knew I had to finish it by the end of the day. So I think, guys, the conclusion is, like, if you want to start reading, just, take the first tip, which is the consistency tip. That's the most powerful one. and kind of making it easy, leaving a book on your bedside table. Reading should be a hobby, something enjoyable, a process that you enjoy the journey of. And I think the essence of this video, I hope that I've conveyed, is that reading is something that you should definitely try and get started in, and you don't have to read loads to get the benefits of it. You just need to read a few books and they can have a really big, powerful impact on your life. So those are my 6 tips for reading. And thank you for getting to the end of the video. As a reward, I've left a series of book recommendations in a Notion page, link below. So if you're stuck on what to read or you want to see some of my recommendations, I'll also leave a link to Storygraph and Goodreads. It's quite a good platform. They've recently done some updates, so I would really recommend using either one of those two, particularly to track streaks, as I was talking about earlier. So before we go, I want my parting word to be to you, at least read 1 page today. If you watch this whole video, you at least have time to read 1 page. Thank you very much for watching, and good luck with your reading goals this year.